Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Syed, and again, I would also like to thank Muslim Women's Alliance for inviting me here today to speak with all of you, and you, mashallah, for joining us here today on this important topic. And Jazakallah khair, Ustada Zainab, for the wonderful start we got. And actually, there's a lot of overlap to what I was going to say as well, in the sense that grief is a very complicated process. Grief looks different for everyone. There's no set timeline. A lot of what I'm going to discuss today is going to be based in the clinical work I've done in my practice, especially in the past year. So as many of you can probably imagine, since essentially March, April 2020, much of the work we do in a clinical therapy, psychotherapy setting has been very focused on people's experience with the pandemic. And one of the things that, of course, sticks out is the concept of grief. Most of us have not experienced Some of us may not have had any type of what we would consider loss necessarily before the pandemic, but most of us have not experienced anything like what it's been in the past year and a half. And by that I mean, for most Muslims in our traditions, in our cultures, there's a very social aspect of grief that allows for the processing. So having family come to visit, being part of attending a janazah, having people come and bring food for 3 days, or again, as Ustada said, for several days, sometimes for much longer, having people willing to step up and help with household chores and sending food. These may not seem like big things, but for the person experiencing the grief and the loss, it's very significant, and it's a way of feeling support. The pandemic really changed that for a lot of us. Many of us did learn to send, DoorDash or Uber Eats or find a way to send food. But it's not the same as sending something that you made. It's not the same as bringing it yourself. It's not the same as being able to stop and visit and talk with someone or spend time with them as a way of showing support. Especially in the beginning, 6 months or so, a lot of people could not attend a janazah. So if there was a death, or when someone is sick, it's not even just a death, but there's a grief knowing that you can't support someone you love. So when someone was sick, when someone was in the hospital, we couldn't visit them the way we used to. We couldn't, be there for their family and be there to support them physically with our presence. Sometimes with nothing said. And many of you may have experienced this, that sometimes when you go to attend, after a death or a loss, or when someone's sick, just physically being there, even if you don't speak, can have a profound impact. Reading Quran by them, making dua for them, or just, holding a hand, physically being near someone, physically comforting someone, giving affection, can have a very profound impact. And for those of us who had to grieve from far, that made a very impactful difference to our ability to be able to grieve. So what does that look like? In a clinical setting, the things that I try to teach my clients to be aware of is understanding how grief can impact you. For some people, exactly as Dr. Ustada said, grief is sadness. But for many, it's anger. For many, it's irritation, short temper. For some, it's not being able to sleep, or it's not having an appetite, or the opposite, where you can't stop eating, like not being able to satiate yourself no matter how much you're eating. It's like you're almost trying to fill this hole that's not getting full. For some people, it's not being able to sleep, or you can't stop sleeping. It can look like not being able to get out of bed for days at a time. It can look like not being able to get restful, quality sleep. For many of us, it's a lack of an ability to focus or concentrate. It's a lack of ability to pay attention to what's being said, to enjoy things, to be able to relax, to, even when you're not thinking about the loss that you experienced, to actually be able to just be present in the moment that you're in. These are all ways that grief can actually manifest in someone's day-to-day life. People really struggle when you're not able to take care of yourself. So whether it's a grief, and we'll talk about different experiences of what can cause grief, but not being able to take care of yourself throughout all of them is the common issue that extends the grief and makes it harder. So when we talk about what causes grief, illness and death, loss are the most common things that people think of. But in the past year, the majority of the grief that I've worked with for my clients who have come to see me have not necessarily been death. And the reason I wanted to make sure to speak about this is that it's a topic that many people feel a lot of shame about, especially women will feel a lot of shame about, I shouldn't be sad about this. But it's things like not being able to celebrate your wedding, having waited months or years to be able to get married, or having so much joy in your heart and your family, but having to cancel the celebration, not being able to have the party, not being able to wear the dress you wanted. Studying for so many years, working so hard to attain a degree and not being able to have a graduation, not being able to have the ceremony, struggling to get pregnant, wanting so much to build a family, wanting so much to be able to have that experience and feeling, but not being able to have a baby shower or not being able to have family visit at the hospital when the baby is born or come to see and share the experience of having a newborn. A lot of people feel so much guilt about these things. That alhamdulillah, I'm healthy, my family's healthy, so I shouldn't be sad about this. There's so much experience of exactly as, Ustada said, people trying to, well-meaning, well-intentioned people, trying to tell them, oh, have perspective. It doesn't matter that, we can't have the party that you wanted, but you're getting married. That's all that matters. And yes, at the end of the day, that is the important thing. But as a human being, we still feel what we feel. And it's important to let yourself be validated in your feelings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us out of stone. We aren't meant to be perfect. We aren't meant to be unfeeling. We feel what we feel. So being angry, being sad, being frustrated, feeling disappointed can exist with your joy. People sometimes also think that if I'm sad, that means I'm not happy. Or if I'm, disappointed that I can't have the baby shower I wanted, I'm not grateful for being pregnant. And that's not true. Human beings are very capable of having multitude of feelings at the same time, to the point of being overwhelmed by them. We are capable of having several different emotions that all exist at the same time, and each and every one of them is relevant and valid for us. So to have mercy on yourself and to have that rahmah and compassion for your own self, that it's okay that I feel this way. That I can be both happy that this is happening, I can have joy that this is happening, and I can be disappointed. And I can have, a joy in my life, a blessing, and a grief at the same time. For some people, it is very uncomfortable when you share this. For many people, it's very hard and they don't know what to say. Again, as hard as it is to support somebody through a death, it's much easier than supporting somebody from being sad that they couldn't celebrate their newborn or that they couldn't celebrate their wedding or their graduation. A lot of people are struggling with not being able to see family for extended periods. My husband's family, his mom, he has a widowed mother who lives in India. He usually visits every year and a half at the most. At this point, it's been 3 years. And it was because we were planning to visit summer of 2020, and unfortunately that didn't happen. Summer of 2021, it still wasn't safe. There's a grief there. There's a grief there about she not being able to be a part of our life and what's going on, him not being able to bring her here to visit as we had planned. There's a grief. I had a baby in July 2020 as well, not being able to share that. It was a very different experience, not having friends and family come to the hospital and visit. People sent gifts, mashallah, people sent food, and that was extremely appreciated. But there was definitely a feeling of no one seeing him. Nobody is watching these things. My first child, my mom came to the hospital. My whole family came to the hospital. My in-laws, people came to the house. It's not the same when you're sending pictures. I had a cousin pass away last summer as well, and none of us could visit her in the hospital in her last days. Her husband was the only one allowed, and even that. And that was in Texas. The rules are different also state by state. Very frustrating that she was in the ICU and people couldn't go and be with her and see her. Even the grief of knowing that her 8-year-old son was only able to FaceTime. He wasn't able to physically be with her. All of these different things, people will say, well, at least you were able to attend that janazah. You were able to fly there. Yes, alhamdulillah, I was. But even having what's almost called a secondary grief of knowing what her family went through, knowing that her parents couldn't see her, knowing that her siblings couldn't see her, even that was hard to hold. So some of the things that we need to be conscious of when we talk about how to take care of ourselves in these moments is understanding number one priority has to be to let yourself feel. We can't stop ourselves from that. Trying to force yourself not to cry, being mad at yourself. Or when, again, well-meaning people will say that, make dua, pray. Yes, absolutely do those things. But at the same time, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. Let yourself feel what you're feeling. Make sure that you're being conscious of whether or not you have an appetite, and is it a healthy appetite? Whether or not you're sleeping. Adults need 6 to 8 hours of quality sleep. If you're sleeping 3 hours and can't go back to sleep, if you're sleeping 12 hours and can't get out of bed, something's not right. If this is happening more than a few weeks after whatever the incident was, something's not right. If you're not able to focus, if you're short-tempered and irritable, something's not right beyond a few weeks. These are all indications that we either need to step up the self-care in terms of writing in a journal, talking to friends, exercising regularly. Adults need 3 to 4 times of brisk exercise a week to be able to manage not only our physical health, but our mental health, to be able to regulate mood and sleep well, and to be able to have energy. If this isn't happening, seek out help. Seek out a therapist, seek out a psychologist, seek out spiritual guidance. But recognize that your emotional and mental health is as important as your physical health. The same way it's important to recognize that when your physical health is not doing well, if we have symptoms of physical illness for more than a few weeks, it's time to see somebody. It's time to see a doctor. It's time to get care. The same is true for our mental health. When our emotional health is suffering for more than a few days, more than a few weeks, depending on the incident, a situation that's closer to you might take longer. A situation that's a little bit more removed might not take long. But again, everyone processes grief differently. There is no timeline. There is no, it took my sister a week to be okay after this, so I should be okay in a week, but it's been a month and I'm still not okay. Neither is wrong. There isn't a right or wrong in how to process grief. Everyone is different about that. So in these very unique times, which inshallah will be over one day soon, we have to find ways to help us manage when we don't have the things that we're used to having, when we're not able to have the social support and the structure and the routine and the traditions that give us comfort. We have to find ways to do that for ourselves. So Jazakallah khair for attending today, and we're going to open it up in the few minutes that we have for questions, please.